Well, clearly we are not in the backyard anymore cooking. We're at Norman's Orlando. We've been open a number of months now, and it's incredible to see the guests and the reaction they're having, and the press and the reaction the press is having. In many ways, it's been the realization of the dreams I've been having while we put the whole thing together. Our team is like 50, 60 people now, and my partner Kim and I are always working with the team to make every day something we hope you will fall in love with. Today, I'm going to be making two dishes with you that harken back to the early days, one of which remained in the early days, not served at the restaurant, maybe served at home, but the other one goes back to those early days, but managed to stay a part of the history of Norman's for the last 30 years. Chefs get hungry too, and I come to the restaurant by myself, sometimes before everyone else, and I need a little bit of nourishment. So I'm gonna go back in time to when I was a young cook in Key West days, and this is something that I would make for myself then. It's a kicked up version of a cannibal sandwich. Now, a cannibal sandwich would have been made with ground beef, and I'm not really likely to eat raw ground beef, and the name cannibal is a bit of a tip there. So I'm going to use some filet mignon. We'll come back to you in a second when you're warm. Meanwhile, back over here, it's really simple. I'm going to take some herbs and just chop them up a little bit. I would go to this kitchen, it's called the Port of Call in Key West, and actually I'd come there on purpose early because I was nervous, young cook. I didn't know how to make a lot of things. And so I would try to get there before my boss, who owned the place, and make things like the Caesar salad dressing, because being alone, if it broke, I could fix it when no one else was around, and that was helpful. And other things like that. So I'm just gonna take this parsley and drop it in here. I'm gonna crack an egg. And there were so many things that were first-time things for me at the Port of Call. I was a rookie. Even though I'd been cooking probably 6 years, I still was just a green cook. It takes years. It takes years to get to the point where you're feeling like it's second nature, it's comfortable. So a little clarified butter and some Cuban bread. In Key West, always Cuban bread. I mean, I was thinking about what I would do today. I was thinking, well, I could get some nice sourdough. But then I'm thinking, well, that wouldn't have been what I would have done, because there was nothing like an artisanal bakery in Key West back at that point in time. Keep an eye on the toast. Some shallots or onion. And then we'll let that kind of get to know each other. A little bit more heat on that. Down here in the bowl, what we've got is the basic elements for something like a steak tartare. Steak tartare, fancy, much more so than the cannibal that we're talking about. Salt, pepper, herbs, just building it all together. There's not actually a hardcore sequence to this. I like toast that's made to order. When people make toast like 3 hours in advance, this annoys me. I want the toast still pliant and beautiful. So I'm just going to keep that over here for now. And then come back to one of the controversial elements of a steak tartare for some people. Anchovies. Here they're packed in oil. And this adds that umami characteristic that's so central to deep flavors. Here, filet mignon. Just kind of rock the knife through the meat. And I don't advise the food processor for this, because it mashes the meat, makes a mush out of the meat. We don't want mush. We want nice little cubes of beef to make our cannibal sandwich. Okay, just come through there. With the meat being cold like this, you're gonna have a nicer time. Now I'm gonna work in a bigger bowl, so go ahead and drop the meat down here. That's a little bit perfect. And then the anchovy. Mince that up. This, and anchovies, I mean, I'm a kid from the Midwest. Anchovies were not something that I was used to eating, but my chef was Italian by way of Philadelphia, and he was used to that. So we had anchovies going to our steak tartare. Everybody does that's going to make steak tartare the traditional way. Okay, so I've got a little bit of shallot, a little bit of anchovy, a little bit of parsley, the egg yolk, salt, pepper. Now, pick a pepper sauce. This is a Caribbean hot sauce, or it's not really a hot, it's kind of sweet, like an A1. And if I didn't have this, I'd probably use A1. And a little bit of cold pressed extra virgin olive oil. Okay, now we're gonna just mix this up. Cannibal sandwich is made with ground beef, and that's how I ate it. I would come to work fresh from the beach. Actually, we cooked in our bathing suits at this restaurant. We had our aprons, and we had our work boots, and we had our chef's shirts, not even jackets. But we could go to the beach and swim for an hour and then come to work. And when you come to work after swimming in the ocean, you're ravenous. You are ready for something. And you don't want to necessarily cook something elaborate. So by doing this cold preparation of beef, I was able to sate my hunger in a very primal way. So here we have this, and you can let that hang out for a few minutes while the flavors come together. We wanted to let the beef mature and the flavors coalesce, come together for just a minute. I mean, this is a cold dish, so we're kind of moving along too. And then I'm gonna build it over here, and there's more here than I'm gonna put on this piece of bread. Just push it off there. A little bit more. Maybe there's enough there for 2 or 3 of these open face. This is kind of a bruschetta or bruschetta, depending on how you like to pronounce that word. I'm not hung up on it, particularly either way. Then I've got my beautiful open face cannibal sandwich. And I'm going to take something I never did back in these ancient days in Key West, which is to garnish it with some caviar. Some things don't change. Cannibal sandwich, steak tartare. Some things do change, like having the wherewithal to have caviar on top of it. This is a mother of pearl spoon. There's no interaction with the delicate roe of the caviar. And you just go in. You've come back from a hard day of swimming, raking leaves, maybe a run, something like that. You want fast deliciousness, something that's going to replace the energies you've spent to prepare you for the energies you will need for the night coming to you. My God, the caviar just makes it a whole nother dimension. The first dish goes back to my earliest days, and it stayed there. It remains a memory, but not a dish I still make, not very often anyway. The next dish also started my early days, but it remains something that I still make today in the new restaurant.
Everything, yes.
Carlos,
Yes.
you see how you can't see this?
Yes.
So we want to bring the
little
chard. We want the chard to be showing. I don't want the fish covering it.
Okay.
I want the fish to be on the belly of the mashed potatoes, but I want to see the color of that.
You got it.
Okay, probably the most ordered dish of all in the history of our restaurants is the pan-cooked filet of Key West yellowtail with a belly of mashed potatoes. We use roasted garlic to call it, why they're called garlicky mashed potatoes, because we roast garlic, which really softens the flavor of the garlic. It makes it much more delicate and generously beautiful. That's in the mashed potatoes. We will rotate the vegetable depending on seasonality, what our farmers are telling us they've got, and then So it's Swiss chard now, and then the yellowtail. What we do is we take the fillet of yellowtail, we dust it in some flour, we pat off the extra flour, we dip that into what's called a custard, which is a mixture of half and half and beaten eggs, a little bit of seasoning in that. Dip the fish into that. An order comes in, we lift it up out of that egg wash, we put it into a very hot pan that's got a slick of clarified butter, and that creates a little bit more richness to it and gives us the golden color that we're looking for. Citrus butter is the butter sauce for that, and there's the yellowtail. All right, to get your pick, that's just a raw section of orange. It's called a supreme, if you want to know in more classic terms, and it mirrors the citrus of the citrus butter sauce. We don't do things just for the sake of color, like, oh, for color. That's a crutch. It has to be back somehow involved in the dish. Just like the corn shoots that were on the Peruvian choclo dish, the corn of the corn shoots, Peruvian choclo, that's corn times 2. Okay, next up. So I'm gonna take a beautiful piece of snapper. Make sure there's no skin, no scales, and I'm gonna put it in this flour as soon as I've seasoned the flour. Now, a lot of my chefs would right now be looking at me and going, what is he doing with white pepper? He doesn't use white pepper. But in the days where I was first doing this dish, the French chefs that I worked for, they would insist on white pepper because they did not want black spots showing up on their fish. Just drop that into the flour and just give it a couple of turns. You might see, when you do this, you might see scales because actually the flour helps reveal some scales that you may not have seen with your eye preceding to that. So every now and then you'll find a scale. I'm gonna let that sit and sort of collect its wits while I get the pan. And I'm gonna use this heavy bottom pan here. Classic. Get the fire rolling. Now you wanna heat up your pan with no oil, no butter in it. Let it get warm first, because otherwise you're gonna cook the butter or cook the oil. That changes the flavors. You don't want that. What I do is hold my hand over it. When it begins to be where it's a little bit, I got a register, that's hot enough. So I'm gonna go ahead and put a slick of clarified butter. Clarified butter has a higher burn point than what would be called whole butter. So there's some whole butter right here. Now I'm gonna take the fish, come back over to the pan. I want to see the oil getting warmer. Sometimes we call it smiling. Start to see a little bit of smoke come up. And then again, knock off the extra flour. The name of this classic dish is called meunière. Meunière translated is in the style of the miller's wife. Now a miller, the person who mills the wheat to make the flour. So à la meunière is done with flour. Without flour, it's not à la meunière. I'm gonna go ahead and give that a little shake back and forth. Remove the flour. Let that flour begin to get toasted, because the aroma of the flour toasting in the clarified butter, the signal that things are moving along the train tracks the way they need to. So give it a shake from time to time. This is a thin fillet of fish. This is a snapper. In Key West days, it was always yellowtail snapper, almost always. For this particular dish, not for every dish. Lots of different snappers are used in Key West cooking. You want to get a nice kind of golden brown going. Not quite yet. This dish today, I'm not making potatoes, I'm not making vegetables, I'm just eating the fish. I just had a sandwich, as you've seen, with the cannibal sandwich with the filet mignon and the caviar. That was my appetizer. I don't need a lot more food. As a matter of fact, since I'm gonna be cooking tonight, I don't want a lot more food. I prefer to cook hungry. It keeps my senses more keen by cooking hungry. Starting to see that nice crust developing right there. Now, over the years, everyone's palate changes. Mine changes too. I think in some ways my palate's become more accepting of simpler flavors. Not always, but the purity of flavors is something that I'm very much satisfied with. The purity of that caviar going up against the beef, I didn't need a whole lot of other ingredients in that. Make sure that when you turn the fish, you do it in a way that that butter is not going to come up and sting you. Now we're going to do something else that's in the style of a la Meunière, which is we're going to add butter. The famous 3-star Michelin chef Fernand Pointe famously said about cuisine, "Give me butter, butter, and more butter." And this dish does that. Let's drop that in there. And we bathe the fish in some butter. We don't want the fire to be too hot now. We want to let the butter cook the fish. If we get too hot, the whole butter could burn and become greasy, and we don't want to allow that. You can see from the edges of the fish that it's cooking through. You can look down this place where the spine comes through. You don't want to see any redness in there. And then baste your fish. Those beautiful foaming bubbles. This is cooking the fish in butter. Those of you at home, I don't know if you've done this before, but once you see how to do it and learn how to do it, you will see why Fernand Pointe said butter, butter, butter. And this is beautiful. This is just nice. I'm gonna feel it. Is it cooked? Almost. I'm gonna get a pan ready to offload my fish. I'm gonna come back over here though, because we gotta have lemon juice to make this dish work. So some fresh lemon, you roll it across your cutting board or your table. It helps release the juice nicely. If you've got a little strainer, you can use the strainer. I'm gonna strain it through my fingers today. One more check on the doneness of the fish. It's springing back nicely. Of course, it's a little thinner on the tail than up here by where the head of the fish is. This is where I want it to be. And no, I'm not going to throw away this butter. You'll see. Just like this. As it sits, the temperature internally is going to rise up. That's called the ride, actually. The temperature, whether it's meat or it's fish, it rises up. Now I'm going to let this become our sauce. I'm going to get my plate ready. Bring it here. Get that nice kind of hazelnut color going in the butter. You smell this kind of nuttiness that comes up. And then I'm going to grab some lemon and just pass it through my fingers, catching any seeds. And the butter and the lemon are reacting and turning in the pan, like so. Take it off the fire, don't want to burn it. The smell of the lemon just got really intense, really beautiful. I'm going to even finish it with a little bit more butter. We're not trying to emulsify it, just make it a little bit more creamy. And then I'm going to add some chives. This dish is essentially a French dish in many ways. French chefs I worked for, chives were important, and they remain important. They made the dish what it is. It gives the dish its identity. Coming back over to the plate with our spatula. Lay that in, and guess what? Just put a little bit more butter right there. Like gilding the lily, you might think, but you do that with omelets too. And then I'm gonna take some of this beautiful brown butter and just lay it over the fish. This is the sauce, just like this. The first dish we made today, the cannibal sandwich. This is from the origins of my cooking. Can't really say it was my cooking because I didn't invent that, but the origins of the way I would feed myself in a professional kitchen, to be able to go into a kitchen, know what else was there, and have the ingredients and the silence and my hunger all coming together. This dish is a dish that, in a very similar fashion, is still served at Norman's. This is the kitchen that we're in right now. We'll serve it with mashed potatoes and a seasonal vegetable, and that will be the way that the guests will have it. Let's get into this beautiful, delicate fish, a fish that I think kids would eat, and I think everybody would eat this particular fish because of 3 simple words. Are you ready? Butter, butter, and more butter. So many times I think about musicians and the early songs they did, whether it was James Taylor's Sweet Baby James or the Beatles doing Get Back on the Roof. For me, as a chef, the dishes that people loved back then and still love today, I love the fact that they do. I don't mind that they want them again. As a matter of fact, I see them turn their friends onto them. I see them turn their own children onto them. The snapper that we do here, so similar to what I've done since my earliest days. So it has this power to continue to tell its story. And I hope that I can always make dishes that tell the story and connect people and make them want to have me do it again and again and again.